All right, let's get right into it. We're going to unpack a really fascinating financial report that lays out a pretty dramatic scenario for the rest of 2026, and it all boils down to one question. Is this incredible AI rally about to hit a brick wall, or is the party just getting started?
Okay, first things first. Context is absolutely key here. This entire analysis is pinned to a very specific moment in time, February 25th, 2026. Keep this date in your head, because everything we're about to talk about is a forecast looking forward from that exact day.
And on that day, man, the market just feels unstoppable. We're talking record highs under the Trump presidency, with the S&P 500 knocking on the door of 7,000. And what's fueling this whole thing? Well, it's the AI revolution, plain and simple.
So, this brings us to the big question, right? The one everyone asks at the top. You've heard it a million times. This time it's different. We're going to dig in and see if this report actually buys that argument, or if it's warning us that history is about to repeat itself, and not in a good way.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the market at its absolute peak. Then, we'll get into the bubble thesis, the theory behind the forecast. After that, the really juicy part, the anatomy of the crash itself. Then, we'll see how it could spread globally. And we'll finish with something pretty wild, what the report calls the Korean anomaly.
All right, let's really paint the picture here. What was the vibe on February 25th, 2026? Well, according to this report, it was complicated. A real mix of crazy optimism and some serious underlying tension. And what's so wild is just how many different things are pulling the market in opposite directions. On the one hand, you've got policy letting 401k money flood into high-risk stuff like crypto, and AI darlings like NVIDIA are just crushing it with these insane growth numbers. But then, whoa, the Supreme Court steps in and strikes down these big global tariffs. At the same time, the US and China had this fragile truce going on. It's like this massive tug-of-war happening in real time.
Okay, so that's the scene. Now for the big question. Why on earth does this report predict a bust when things seem so good? Well, it all comes down to the theoretical framework they're using.
The core idea here is something called malinvestment. It's a concept from the Austrian School of Economics, and it's actually pretty simple. When credit is super cheap and money is easy to get, people just invest in bad ideas, stuff that isn't really backed by real demand. And the report's big claim is that this is exactly what's happening with AI, but on a gigantic scale. And they don't just say this, they point to specific examples. I mean, look at this. You've got self-driving startups like Wave with these mind-boggling valuations. Then there are the hidden costs, the insane amounts being spent on data centers and power grids. Not to mention your 401k money getting funneled into these bets. And maybe the craziest part? AI can now predict what most fund managers are going to do. The whole market is becoming one giant echo chamber.
And you know what this all leads to? Those four most dangerous words in investing. This time it's different. The report really channels the thinking of people like Ken Fisher here. The idea is that technology changes, sure, but people don't. Market cycles don't. And thinking that AI somehow makes us immune to a crash, well, that's like the ultimate red flag. Then there's this number, 18.2 years. This is really fascinating. The report brings up the work of Edward Dewey and his theory on market cycles. And get this, if you take the absolute bottom of the 2008 crash and you add 18.2 years, where do you end up? Smack dab in the middle of late 2026. The report points to this as a huge warning sign. And it's not just theory and history. They back it up with some heavy-duty math. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the acronyms, but here's what you need to know. One model basically says there's an 85% chance of a crash starting in Q3. Another one says the market is wound so tight that any little shock could set off a massive downturn. And the third one shows a huge disconnect between all the money being poured into AI and, well, actual economic growth. A gap like that can't last forever. Okay, so that's the why. Now for the how. The report actually lays out a predicted step-by-step timeline for how this whole thing could unravel in 2026. It's basically a three-act play. Act 1, from February to May, is the final melt-up. This is where all the 401k money piles in, pushing things to one last crazy peak. Act 2, over the summer, the cracks start to show. The AI startups start bleeding cash. And then Act 3, the finale from September to December. That's when the bubble bursts. Big tech companies lower their forecasts. The trading algorithm starts selling like crazy, and panic hits.
And look, a crash like this in the US doesn't just stay in the US, right? Of course not.
So the report then looks at the global fallout, the ripple effects across the entire world.
And wow, just look at these numbers. The report is forecasting a 35% drop for the Nasdaq, 30% for the S&P 500. Even Europe takes a 20% hit. We're not talking about a little dip here. This is a full-blown bear market prediction.
And it's not just stocks. Everything gets hit. People would pile into safe stuff like U.S. bonds, so yields would fall. Gold, it's predicted to shoot past $3,000 an ounce. Oil would totally tank because everyone would be scared of a recession. And here's the weird part. The U.S. dollar would actually get stronger. It's called the dollar smile, this rush for cash when things get ugly.
But okay, in the middle of all this forecasted chaos, the report points to one place, one market, that it thinks could actually do well. They call it the Korean anomaly.
And the reason is really interesting. It has nothing to do with AI or some new tech. It's about a change in the law. Literally, on the same day this report is dated, South Korea passed a new rule that forces companies to cancel their treasury shares, basically to get rid of them for good.
Okay, the best way to think about this is like a pizza. Imagine a company's earnings is the pizza, and the shares are the slices. This new law basically forces companies to reduce the number of slices. So the pizza stays the same size, but now your slice is bigger. It's just simple math. It automatically makes each remaining share more valuable by boosting things like earnings per share.
So you get this incredible split. On one side, you have the U.S. market, which the report says is heading for a big fall because of the AI bubble, and on the other, you have South Korea, which is predicted to be super resilient, maybe even go up. All because this law is forcing companies to create value, which could suck in a ton of money from all over the world.
And this table really puts it all together. It's the whole forecast in a nutshell. A big hit to U.S. tech, a rush into gold for safety, and this really unique situation in South Korea, where a new law could completely change the game. It's a pretty bold call for how the rest of the year could play out.
So this leaves us with a really interesting final thought, doesn't it? The big idea in this whole report is that tech might fuel the good times, but it's the rules of the game, the institutions, that decide how it all ends. And when money flees from one place, it has to go somewhere else. This report makes a pretty compelling case for where it might go next. And it really makes you think, where will the next great rotation lead?